be, his own creative person and not do it Dan's way kind of thing and be in my shadows. And it's time for him to want to grow. So, more power to him. We're happy to see that. And we're hoping Josh does really well. I mean, we're not trying to replace him or anything. We're just doing our show and going to continue it on because I still want an outlet. I still want a show. And, that's about it for that, You'll probably see Josh around the Beast every now and then, but me and Jeremy will be going forward with this show.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity. I want to give a shout out to Uncle Lou real quick. I think Uncle Lou helped me get the seat here. So thanks, Lou.
Yeah, we were looking for hosts, and we went through about 20 guys, and they all wanted money, and you were willing to work for peanuts. So
I actually decided to pay you.
We like Jeremy because Jeremy. We actually looked at some professional hosts, but that were out there more than you are. But I like your show. I like the way you sound on the air, and I like the fact that you came from the Beast. Now I know that you really started killing some bucks when you started learning the Beast ways. And you've been on the Beast for how many years?
10 years now. I joined in September 2013.
And you're a Michigan boy that moved out west, right?
Yeah. I got tired of hunting the Michigan 11 point, so I had to move out west to get a few bigger bucks.
Wow. How many you got there on the wall behind you?
Oh, I got 7 here and 1 in the other room, and then another one at the taxidermist. A couple antelope now too.
Yeah.
So things are going well.
One of these days, antelope or elk or something before I get too old.
Yeah. That's a tough challenge there for sure. So Dan, we talked about how we got here. Let's talk about what's been going on in your neck of the woods since you and Josh wrapped up the show on his channel. One of the things that I thought you did really well was the story of Jamie's buck, the Owl Island buck. You released a video on that, and I'm sure a lot of people have watched that. It's got a lot of views from what I've seen.
They hadn't. They should. It was an awesome video.
Yeah, maybe give us a little more background behind the scenes, fill in what the video didn't have time to show.
So Owl Island, obviously we nickname all of our properties so that we don't use the real names. But that, if you go back to midsummer, me, the Rat Slayer, Eric, and our friend Dave Greenhorn from the Beast, all went scouting, and we went walking through a swamp to check it out. We went and looked at some remote islands way back in the swamp, and knew that there's going to be a good acorn crop. We wanted to see what the oaks looked like out there and the deer travel and stuff. And we found some really good sign. And then when we got to the last island, we ran into an injured owl, and we carried it out. So if people refer to that video, it's kind of cool because you can watch that video and look at how we're talking about hunting, and then go to the Owl Island 9-pointer video and see how we hunted it, because it shows all the hunts. It shows them briefly, so it's not boring, but it shows all the hunts. So you see how we hunt it down. And I started on one end, and I hunted in there with Dave, and we saw like eight deer. I mean, it was a zoo. And one thing that it really makes you realize too is that time frame, and I say it in the video, that time frame of the first couple weeks when the season opens in Wisconsin, which is, like early to mid-September, when you have an acorn drop year with white oaks that's got a good crop in the swamps, that is better than rut. And a lot of people raise an eyebrow to that, but I always see more deer. I always see bigger deer, and I don't see any hunters. The one hunt I had 8 deer come in. The next one I had 25 deer in one spot come in. It was incredible. But I didn't get a deer I wanted to shoot come in. And I did put a camera out there, a regular camera, not a cell camera. I put a regular camera out there on one of the islands when we scouted. And I got a whole bunch of pictures of bucks and a couple shooters. but there was one that I had some interest in, and it was a big 9-pointer. But there's a couple real wide, older, short tined 8s that look pretty cool. And we started hunting these areas down, and I never got eyes on that 9, but I was seeing everything else kind of. And then one day, James wanted to come with me, and it was going to be his first time out there. And we were going to go hunt his backside that we had not been to. We hadn't even scouted, because our scout ended early when we found that owl. But we were going to go sit these points. And Eric had hunted back in there already, and he had seen a buck and a doe, and then had something else moving they didn't see, and he thought that we should check that area out because it didn't really get hunted too heavy. So we were headed there, and then we weren't seeing a lot of sign along the way, and checking some spots. We were kind of running out of time, and James says to me, you know, Dad, I'd kind of like to hunt that spot where you saw 25 deer if you're not going back over there. I said, all right. There's an island over there that I didn't get to either, so I'll go to the island. You go to the 25 deer spot. And so we went over there, split up, and he went in there, and just as the deer started coming out around me, my phone starts buzzing like somebody's trying to call me. And I look down and it's him, and I know there's only one reason he's calling me.
Sure.
So or not, I answered it, and he said, Dad, I shot one. And I'm like, what'd you shoot? He goes, looked like a big wide 8. He says, I think it was one of those short tined 8s you're telling me about, you know? So I'm like, all right, I'll get right down and come over. Because, I mean, we were way back, you know. So I get down and I go over there, and he's waiting for me at the tree, and he says he looked, there's blood all over the place. We go to where he shot, and the arrow's laying on the ground. And there is a puddle of blood like you wouldn't believe. I mean, I can't really show it on YouTube, or they demonize me, right?
Sure.
So I look at the puddle of blood, and I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of blood. And I said, did the thing just stand there when you shot it? He goes, no, it bolted. He goes, it mule kicked and bolted. I'm like, man, you must have popped the heart. And he did.
Yeah.
The heart was severed in like 3 pieces. So the deer only got like 40 yards. And when we get to it, one half of the rack is sticking up out of the brush. And even from a few feet away, I'm like, that is the 9-pointer. You shot the 9-pointer. He goes, I didn't see the 9th point, you know, and pull it on. And it was pretty cool until we had to drag it out of that place.
Yeah, I did see.
I literally got home at 1:30 in the morning, and I usually leave for work at 2 o'clock. So I got home at 1:30. I usually leave at 2. So I just went to bed. Unfortunately, Jamie didn't have that option. He has to be at work. He doesn't have his understanding of bosses as I have.
Sure.
I told him to train like I did.
Yeah.
You know, it took me, 25 years of training those boys. But yeah, it was a cool hunt. Very cool. Good to see him back. So, Jamie hasn't hunted with us in over 10 years. He had some things go on in his life that were just hard. And he put the bow down for 10 years. And now he's actually moved back home for a little while he's getting on his feet. And he only hunted a couple times. He got a doe right away, and he was real excited about that. We did a show on that. And then he shot that buck. And now he's like gung-ho. And it's really good to see. I think
nothing will get you more excited than some success. That's for sure.
Right.
No, that Owl Island video, I watched that. That was great. And you can tell, hard not to be a proud dad, right? And to see your son doing something that you've spent your whole life doing, that's got to be pretty exciting. And especially after he was away for a while.
It sounded pretty goofy in that video. I left it in there, but I was like, oh man, when I listened to that, I was like, but I was happy.
Let's talk about Nebraska a little bit. And you did videos on that too, Battle of the Bows. You had the whole crew there with you, and then Josh and his crew. I think they were in a different part of the state from what I could tell.
Yeah.
And you guys ran into some tough conditions there, especially with the weather. So give me a behind the scenes summary. What happened, in Nebraska, and what the challenges were there, and maybe what'd you learn? Because I know you've done plenty of out of state hunting, but that's a little different terrain there in Nebraska where you guys were at. So what'd you take away from that?
Yeah, Nebraska was interesting. I mean, I didn't know what to make of it. To prepare for it, I studied a bunch of maps, looked at a bunch of properties. I called a bunch of people that I knew hunted there, talked to them, and got some recommendations on what kind of properties to look at. And then when we went out there, there was most of the days were over 100 degrees, which was not expected to be that hot. I knew it'd be warm, but not that hot. I mean, one day it was 106 while we're walking to our stands. And I don't care what people say about dry heat and that kind of crap. It was hot.
Yeah.
Drenched in sweat hot. And it was hard to get on deer the way we were hunting. But my mindset was, you know, I went out there and everybody was kind of pushing me towards sand hills and stuff. And Jacob ran right out to the sand hills, you know, and I looked at that stuff and played around with it a little bit and thought, man, there ain't no deer in its right mind going to bed out in a little patch of an acre of cattails and the, 10 miles of sand. It's like the Mojave Desert, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, I'm going to go where Dan knows, and that's the swamps and the hills and stuff inland. So we hit some hill country. We hit some swamps. And honestly, more than to kill, I really wanted to experience Nebraska. I wanted to experience what the hills had to offer, what the swamps had to offer, what the, sand had to offer. And I wanted to kill something along the way. But I did want to spread myself out. And we spread ourselves out quite thin. I mean, we covered, hundreds of miles. Yeah. I mean, literally one day we drive 300 miles, me and Eric. I mean, we drove more than we hunted, going all over the state, checking things out, checking out properties and stuff. And we got one lead when we started hunting more of the eastern kind of half of the state. We started getting more into the type of deer hunting that we've had, around home and around other places and stuff. And we ran into one guy who gave us a lead. We called him Nebraska John on the video. We didn't want to put his full name on there. He didn't want it on there. So that's what we just called him.
Sure.
But he told us about a property called the Holy Land because it's shaped like a cross. And he said, man, nobody even knows that's public. It's some kind of walk-in access thing or whatever. And there's no parking or anything. And it's just nowhere near anything else. It's just in farm country. And he said he's never seen somebody hunt there and stuff. And he said there's big bucks in there like crazy. And the Undertaker, Ricky, was having a real hard time because of the remote hunts. I mean, most of the stuff we went into, I mean, you had to get a mile or two back. And he's out of shape, period. So I said, if that's easier to walk, he says, yeah, we hunt right next to the road. I says, take Ricky in there. And man, did Ricky get in the bucks. Just like crazy. And I was real tempting for a guy like me to just go in there, swoop in there and kill the bucks, or make a good attempt at it, or surround the area and kill them. And we went in there and hunted with Ricky a day. And then I said to Eric, I said, you know what, we got to just let Ricky have this and we'll just go do our own thing. And we never got on bucks like he got on though, but he had action all the way to the end. I was really shocked he came out of there without a buck. But me and Eric hopped around that stuff and we really never got onto stuff. And we ran into some pressure a little bit. And what was funny is if you watch the video, there's one spot where I hunt along this river and we find all this heavy sign coming into this river bottom into the sand. I mean, huge tracks and stuff and lots of deer tracks. And we figure out what tree to be in. And it's like kind of remote and kind of hard to get to and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not impossible or anything, but there wasn't much sign of hunters in there, that far back. And I pick out the tree and then Eric picks out a tree. And then when we get back to hunt, I climb up there and I could see somebody has just been up that tree. And it's like that tree had never been hunted until then, but in the first 5 days of the season, somebody hunted her.
Yeah.
But it had never been hunted any year, any time before that. But you could see where they had to break a branch or two off. And it's like, oh, man. But I get up there and I'm like, with all that traffic. And it was funny because I saw no boot prints, but I saw some barefoot tracks in the mud. And which, bear with me for a second.
Sure.
So I'm like, well, somebody parked their kayak, was walking up and down the sand or whatever, right? So I hunted there. I didn't see a thing. So then later on, I moved down further. Then I started seeing some deer, but nothing of any quality. And somebody hunting in there kind of ruined that. But when we aired that show, and I was telling Eric, that's got to be like a beast member that picked that tree. And it even looked like, might have been beast sticks or something like beast sticks or lone wolf sticks, one of the two that cut into that tree like that. And I get a PM on Facebook from a guy. I watched your video, man. That was me. And he sends me videos of all the bucks or a deer that were around him in the sand and stuff. And he's like, yeah, there were a lot of deer that came out when I was there, but he had hunted there. And I was laughing my butt off seeing that. And then he says he didn't want to get his boots muddy, so he went in barefoot. I'm like, oh, that's why there was barefoot tracks in the mud.
That's interesting. Barefoot access. That's a new one.
You know what? That's how small of a world it is. Every time I show something like that, somebody will contact me and say that was me, or that was my stand that you pointed out and said some dummy put that there. Those guys will contact me, believe it or not. But
that was cool. Dumb, they want to correct the record.
Right. They want to give me a reason. Well, this is why I did that.
Sure.
But then when we went out to the sandhills, because Jacob was having so much success out there, he was running into a lot of deer and seeing a lot of deer and stuff. And when we went out there and we actually gave it a solid attempt, we had run out of time. And Jacob ran through a lot of the stuff, so it kind of got a little burnt out, but we were finding some new stuff, moving around. And there I could see, from taking a second look at it and seeing it from Jacob's perspective and going in there and actually hunting some of it, that's where I would have, if I would have been in there for a week, man, we would have killed deer like crazy if we all hunted that area. So I go back, that's probably where I'm going back to. And that's the funny thing. I mean, a lot of people that don't know who I am or don't know about me will give me a lot of crap about not killing stuff on these road trips. But I've come to a point where it's not really about killing. It's about the enjoyment of the journey and seeing the places and stuff. But when I go back to those places is when you're going to see some killing, because I tend to pick places where it's hard hunts and where, you figure it out. And then I don't necessarily want to go back. I still haven't seen Maryland. I still haven't seen Virginia. You know what I mean? I still haven't been in Texas hunting or Louisiana. So to me, I want to hop around, and that's not the most effective way to kill deer. It's cool. You learn a lot. You see a lot of the country, but the effective way to kill deer for people just looking to kill deer is to go to those out-of-state spots, find a good spot that's known for quality animals, figure it out, and go back year after year picking the cherry while they're still hunting their home state, shooting the deer there. That's the way you have success. But success is measured differently. And for me, success is seeing a lot and learning a lot. I've already killed a lot of deer.
Yeah, and something that you said there, you can define success a lot of different ways. And I like to classify myself as an adventure hunter. So I've been, 7, 8 different states hunting now. But to your point, going back to certain states like South Dakota, for example, I've hunted there a few times. If you do go back to that same area and you did pick up some lessons the first time, 100% agree. That's when you start having the success. And it's not that you can't have success on the first hunt, but you go into day one, the second year, with all the lessons learned from the first week or the first 2 weeks you spent there a year ago, and you're dangerous right from day one then.
Right.
Well, that's cool. That sounds like the videos were great, and I think there's a lot of takeaways there for people that are looking to maybe do their first out-of-state hunt, from how both the crews approach those hunts, what you're looking for, what kind of sign you're setting up on, how you're adapting to those challenging conditions in the weather. So let's talk now about maybe what's going on in your area right now. So it's October 10th. Season's been open in Wisconsin, about 3 weeks now. And in those 3 weeks, if it's anything like any other state I've hunted, pressure changes a lot of things, and a lot of things change in October. So what are you seeing right now, Dan?
So what I seen was, like usual, that first 2 weeks of the season rocked. Now, I didn't get a shooter, but I seen a lot of deer. I had a lot of action, and I didn't see another hunter. Period. When that cold front hit, that was the worst thing that could have happened. All the parking lots filled up, pressure hit, but at the same time, October came, and right around the last week of September, every year, and it doesn't matter what the weather is, I see the deer start getting a little more nocturnal, moving a little more sluggish and stuff. Start of October. Now, if you hunt like a beast and you get close to the bedding, usually you don't have a problem with that. They still move to you. But there's always some deer that come from residual bedding and stuff from a little further, and you see a little more deer if they move a little further or whatever. But I don't see cold fronts making a huge difference in October. Maybe even none. But they do bring out the hunters because hunters believe in it. And you see those parking lots fill up and stuff. And as soon as we get that cold front, out by Owl Island, I run into a guy. Out in the marsh, we were onto a real big 10-pointer, and it dried up. And me and Eric were like, why did all this sign dry up? Where did he move to? What's going on? And then we're still having sightings of him coming into there from a different angle. I'm like, he's still here, but all the sign dried up. Well, then when the youth season came this last weekend, which ended yesterday, or no, Sunday it ended, right? You had to wear orange. So we go out there, and sure enough, here's a guy sitting where all that sign is dried up in a tree. So that's what happened there. So the cold front brought guys out. They went out further. All the parking lots filled up like it was rod or gun season. But with that said, they're still moving. And there's kind of a weird movement right now. It must be with the moon phase or something. There isn't as much movement, but I'm seeing like an earlier movement. Repeatedly, day after day, we're seeing a couple deer at 3 or 4 in the afternoon and nothing towards dark. You know, yesterday in the morning, I was going to work. It was 3:15 in the morning, and a buck walked across the road in front of me, and it was a real big buck. And it's not one I've ever seen before. It's a new one. It was an 8 frame with like foot-long tines.
Nice.
Yeah, walks in front of me. I mean, I'm talking like 150 as an 8, which is a really good buck. And it walks past and goes into a bedding area that I know, a small woodlot that I know is mostly bedding. And it really doesn't have an outlet out the backside. And it's kind of a hidden spot. I'd already hunted there once earlier in the year and had a deer bust me in the tree, which is kind of funny, but different story. And anywho, and I kind of thought, going to work, I'm thinking, it might be a couple hours before daylight, but I think that deer's going to go in there and bed down. I think he's going to stay there. So I worked till midday, but then I got sick, really sick. I don't know what happened. Maybe I ate something funny or something. And I actually just walked out of work, drove home, and I even had a hard time driving. I was feeling so ill. Came home, laid down, went to bed for an hour and set an alarm clock because I had to get up with you. We were going to do some practice on here.
Yeah.
And when I got up, I actually didn't feel that bad. And then after I got done talking to you, I actually, whatever I had left, so I only had that bug for a couple hours. And I thought, well, I got time to hunt. And I think that buck's in there, bedded. So I went over there and set up and snuck in there and set up and stuff. And I only found one rub where that deer went into there. And it was fresh from this morning. So it was him when he went in there, probably. And all the way back there, I didn't find another rub. And I'm thinking that deer just came in there. I don't think he was living in there. It just came in there that day. Because there wasn't any sign that there was anything in there. But I set up, and the wind was whipping. I'm 75 yards from the parking lot and 100 yards from in somebody's backyard, looking in their kids playing in the yard. The first day I hunted there was a band party in the guy's garage. So I don't know how much that's affecting the deer, but the sign tells me that they bed there, regardless of the parking lot and the people and stuff. But you never see a hunter in there. So I'm sitting there, and I had just gotten set up. It's not too long, and I've only been there like an hour, and I still have my bow hanging on a hook, and the wind's whipping, and it's an hour before closing, and I look over. And here's something coming through the brush at me, and I can tell it's a deer. I could see the white throat patch. It's moving its head around in the brush like that, which tells me it's probably a buck rubbing his antlers on the brush. So I know if he spills out underneath me, it's point blank, and I need to get that bow in my hand. So I'm kind of rising up and grabbing the bow, and he pops out real quick on me, and he caught me moving, and I just tried to go slow, and it was the 8-pointer. Tried to get the string on, get it drawn. I just started the draw. I didn't even get the camera on, and he turned around and ran off. He didn't bolt, which was interesting. He looked at me, eyes got big, and he just kind of ducked into the cover and trotted a few steps, and then he just walked off and walked in a circle around me. And what was funny is if Eric would have came, he would have been on the opposite point. And I actually called Dave up to see if Dave wanted to sit on that opposite point. It turned out he was in Kansas scouting. And so I went alone. And when it left, you could hear it the whole way, go right to that point and walk right under those trees. It was kind of bittersweet, but I don't know.
So it sounds like you've had some good action. Just nothing's quite come completely together. That's a big part of the story of my elk season.
How's your elk season going? You've been having some shots, haven't you? And not connecting.
Yeah, it's tough to talk about. I've had so many encounters this year, which because I moved to Montana in February of 2019. So this is my 5th hunting season. I wasn't able to draw any limited entry areas the first year, so I just hunted some. There's elk around, but I've done a ton of learning. Right, you're starting over from square one. I don't know anything about elk. I don't know anything about where the elk live in Montana. So it's taken me a while, but this year by far has been the best year. And I've had 3 shots at bulls over 300 inches. 2 of them ducked and or whirled, and the other one I ranged grass instead of the elk, and I shot about 15 yards short. So it's not going exactly how you draw it up. But on the other hand, thankful just to have the encounters right after spending a lot of time in the elk woods with, I've had lots of elkless days. So it's coming together, and I know it's just a matter of time now.
Do you do any deer hunting or antelope hunting?
So both. I did manage to get an antelope with my bow, spot and stock. Pretty proud of that, because anyone that's ever attempted it knows, man, they can see so good, and they live in open country with hardly any cover. So my approach to antelope hunting is you have to hunt them in terrain. You need some sort of rolling hills where you can use, even though there's no trees, you can get behind a knob or a knoll to sneak up on them and then kind of ambush them. So did shoot really nice antelope as far as antelope go. That'll make Pope and Young, so that was super exciting to me. And then deer, I've only been out 2 or 3 times, but while elk hunting, I've seen 2 different muleys over 150 inches, and kind of not expecting them to be there, jumped them up. Wasn't really hunting for deer, so I've got those on the radar. Our gun season actually starts real early in Montana. It's not this coming weekend, but the following weekend. I think it's the 21st of October. So might be looking for those bucks once the gun season opens.
Nice.
Yeah. So Dan, I know one of the things that we talked about was maybe doing some Q&A, and in future shows, we're hoping to have the option to get people on with video and audio, but today we're not quite there. And I do think maybe we had a slight technical difficulty when I got rolling. So I'm learning the YouTube live stuff here on the fly. So I appreciate everyone bearing with us. But if people do want to drop questions in the chat, you want to go ahead and take some questions now?
Sure. Are there any questions in there yet?
Oh, there's been a lot of chat. So I'll have to scroll through some of them. And one of the things we're also talked about is maybe getting moderators in the future to kind of screen some of these questions so we can make it a little more efficient. But I'll scroll through here and see if we should make Uncle Lou do it. I think Lou said he might be interested.
And we don't give him a choice; just make him. Like, Lou, this is your job.
Yeah. So here's a good one from Sure Guy. It says, Dan, you've hunted many decades in your life. Which decade were you most successful in? 80s, 90s, etc.
90s.
And maybe expand on that. Why do you think that was your best decade?
Yeah. Let's see. In 90, I shot an 11-pointer. 89, the year before the 90s, I shot my biggest typical 10-pointer that's got a 9 3/4 brow tine and like a 10.5 inch brow tine. And then in 91, I shot a buck that scored, I think it was 187, something like that. It was 178. It scored 178 is what it netted. I mean, not gross or whatever.
Sure.
The gross 180s. But and then I think the next year I shot just a gigantic 8-pointer. The year after that, I shot I think it was 92 or I think it was 92. I shot the 400-pound slob, and then at the same year I shot with a rifle. I shot a 170s typical that had 15 points, and
heck of a run there.
Yeah, it was at my prime because it's all I did. That's all I breathed. I mean, I couldn't keep a job or anything. I was like addicted to hunting. So that was my prime. I think a guy has like a lot of people don't realize this. You got a span of about, I would say, 10 good years where you really you got your youthful energy, you got your drive at an unhealthy point where you can really accomplish some things. You got about a 10-year span where you can really knock some stuff down. And you still also have to have the personality to be that type of person. But after that, I mean, you settle down, you start getting more of like the hunter mode. And I think before that, you don't know what you're doing enough to get anything done. But that 10 to 15 year span is when you really are on top of things. And I think that's usually when a guy is probably in his mid 20s to mid 30s, And that's what it was for me.
No, I'd agree with that. Probably a little later for me because I didn't really start taking bow hunting seriously at all until I was like my mid 20s. That's right around the time I got in the beast. Actually, I didn't join the beast until I was 30. So I'd say that's when I got real serious about it. So a little later for me, but yeah, I'd agree. You've got a time where your knowledge is at a high level that it overlaps with your physical conditioning because you need both. And early on, you've got the physical conditioning and not all the knowledge. And later on, you've got all the knowledge and maybe not as much physical conditioning.
A lot of what slows me down, if I'm honest about it, is what I do for the community.
Sure.
The YouTube videos of this, that crap really slows me down. Not that I don't love that and love what I'm doing and love helping people, but if that time was invested on spot checking and stuff like that, like right now, I'm relying a lot on my past knowledge. I'm relying a lot on my spring scouting. But what I'm not doing is running out every day and checking 3 or 4 spots and deciding which one to hunt. Going in and spot checking to see if there's activity in an area. And what I'll find is, like, come the end of the season, I'll go scout something that I had in mind to hunt and didn't hunt, and find sign that there was a huge buck in there, and be like, I could have killed this buck. But if I was doing that more intense in-season scouting, I'd be killing a lot of those bucks for sure. And that's what I was doing back in the 90s. I'd go out on my lunch break and go scout something from work and run back and get back at work all covered in mud and burrs and have my boss mad at me because you got to work with customers and stuff, But that's how I killed them. Where now, I mean, the kill isn't as important to me. I mean, obviously it's important to all of us. That's what we're out there for. But it's not where it's going to, it's not life or death anymore, where it's like people are going to hate me if I don't kill a buck or something. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Next year, if I don't shoot one this year, nobody will even remember if I did or I didn't, basically.
Yeah. And you make a real important point, I think, about being in the woods as often as you can. I've talked about this with a lot of my friends, and I'm seeing that different, but with elk this year. If I'm out there for 3-4 days in a row, I've got a real good handle on them. If I've got to go back to work for 4 days, when I come back, you're almost not totally square one, but they move around a lot, or maybe someone pressured them while you're gone. So the more you're out there day after day, the more you're in tune with the woods for sure.
Yeah, that's, when you look at that, people always say, oh, he's in a really good area. He kills all those bucks by his house, and his houses. So this area sucks. It's hard to get on to big bucks. I mean, it has really good genetics and stuff, but it has pressure like you wouldn't believe. And it drives the deer out of the areas and stuff. And you have to really search and find them. The reason I kill a lot of bucks here is because this is where I live and I can hunt every day and I can keep track of them. That's why, period.
Yeah, that's important.
If I was going to pick a spot to hunt in Wisconsin, I'd be going to Western Wisconsin.
That's right. So everyone listening, get away from Dan's area and go to Western Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dan, we got another question here.
Really, I mean, I think we're drawing a lot of people over here because you go by the public land parking lots and there's non-resident plates and all the spots.
Dan, we got another question here from Josh. It says, Dan, I'm hunting some new public in the Western New York area. Not a whole lot of obvious transitions. Any tips for a newbie? I'm going into my 3rd year.
What kind of terrain?
Doesn't specify. New public, Western New York. So I guess that's probably slightly hilly over there from what I know about New York, but I'm speculating.
I mean, every type of terrain has different things you're looking for. So for me, I have to know the terrain to give him an answer. So, I mean, if he's in hilly terrain, he's going to be looking for the leeward sides. He's going to be looking for thick areas on top, more open on the side hills, but leeward, right? He's going to be looking for, benches and shelves and, those thermal hubs, things like that. If he's hunting, flatter land, he's going to be looking for slightly elevated areas, slightly lower elevers. Like flat land, I always say the highest elevations and the lowest elevations. And then you got to look for the type of terrain that holds a deer. So the transitions, the edges of openings, that kind of thing. Things that stand out. I mean, I'll have people tell me, well, how do I hunt this giant tamarack swamp? Or how do I hunt this giant big woods? Everything is the same. No, it's not. You look at a map of it, and right away I'll find some opening or something. I'll be like, I'll be checking that out. I'll be checking here. You can see where there's higher trees here than the rest of the area. There's something going on there. There's a little elevation change or something that's going to cause deer to go to that. They are going to be in those spots, those different spots. And you'll go out in those spots like a huge swamp or something, and you'll find beds everywhere. But big bucks don't bed everywhere. They'll be in those points. They'll be in those edges. They'll be in those transitions. They'll be where the edge of two types of trees meet and there's a little jog in it. The big bucks bed with a purpose. The general population of other bucks and other deer fill the void. And those are all those other beds you find, or their night beds. I'll look at those big swamps and sometimes you got to look at that map really close to figure it out. You go out there and you'll find all those big bucks in the area will be in certain key spots in that swamp, and the whole rest of the swamp doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's from my own experience, from being around the hunting bees, from listening to you, watching your videos, a lot of that stuff is just time in the woods, right? When you first start, and I know you've talked about this in other videos, you see a buck bed, and as a newer bee style hunter, you think like, there it is, it's figured out, right? But there's so much more to it than that. You need to know the seasonal timing of when that buck's in there, or try to pick it up, or you've got a real good approach in new areas where you don't know that timing. The hunt it 3 times rule: once early, once during the rut, once late season. I think that's great advice, but there's really no replacement for experience. So that's always my advice to people, is just get out there as often as you can and pay attention to what you're seeing. Don't just get out there.
Right. You can't be afraid to just throw hunts at stuff too. If you think something looks good, throw a hunt on it, see what happens, and just keep moving around doing that, and you'll find them. The one thing you don't want to do is find a spot that looks good and camp out there. If you sit there and you don't see deer, you're probably doing it at night. Keep moving, because you can hunt down an area pretty quick. You can be in, you can have like a mile or two of property, and if you hop around and hunt every corner in there, so you spread out, so you hunt different areas, you can find out what's going on in that property pretty quick, because you're going to find there's certain areas that are holding deer and certain areas that aren't. Just keep moving, keep getting into sign, and you'll get on them.
Good tips for sure. Dan, we got another question from Tony Thorson. He says, how high do you get in the average swamp tree? I'm finding it hard to climb high enough to see over the cattails and the swamp grass.
So I've been hunting a lot of swamp, mixing cattails and stuff. Last few hunts after a certain buck or two that I've been chasing, and I've been kind of laughing at it because I haul 5 sticks with me everywhere I go, and I usually use 2, sometimes 3, and I'm getting just above the cattails. Any higher, and I'm going to be a stick out like a beacon. But a lot of times I'm not very high at all in the swamps. I'd like to be, I like to have 5 sticks along. If I need them, I use them. But in swamps, I usually average probably 3 sticks. I'd like to be up 4, but often I'm only up 2. So I probably average 3 sticks, which is probably 15 feet or so. The other day I had a hunt. I was out with Eric, and we went out and hunted an area, and I got my stand up. What I was doing is I was going through a bedding area that I knew of that was in dense cattails, way remote, but had some high spots with some trees in there and stuff. And we had scouted it in the spring. Video we called Never Neverland. And I went in there, and what I'm figuring out is those deer, the bucks, can't get through those cattails very well. And you could tell bucks weren't going down the trails that does are going down, because they're going on, and they're following the little grass islands, which are tiny, but you can see them on aerials. If you zoom in, you can see the difference between the grass and the cattails. And there's like these little island passages of grass that the bucks can travel down. And you can see the sign told you that's what they're doing. So I went from one spot, and I moved to the next, and it was a grassy opening like that. And I didn't know what I'd have for trees because I hadn't hunted that, and just kind of briefly walked through it while I was scouting. But where I needed to be based on the wind and stuff, there was one tree I could get in. Well, there's maybe 2 I could have done, but there was one that just had the best option. And man, I could only get that stand up. I don't know. I'd say it's probably about 8 feet, maybe 9, but I could reach up and grab the stand from the ground. And I got the stand in there, and this little, trees this big around. But it got me up high enough I could shoot over the cattails into the holes. You couldn't do it on the ground. And you sit there and you feel like you're, like you're that light on the top of the water tower, like everything's going to see you.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And I can't stress this enough. You feel like that. It's kind of the fat girl thing. You feel like that. But the truth is, that's a spot where deer have never smelt or seen a person that don't expect it at all. And if you can just blend in with those branches long enough to get an arrow in them, I think you're fine. And experience has taught me that. Well, I was sitting there, and I had got the stand up, got the sticks in, and I had to actually cut a branch off that was in my back, and I threw that down underneath the stand. And then I put my camera arm on. And while I'm putting the arm on, I hear what sounds like a sneeze, but I'm not sure. Like, it's like, that sounds like a sneeze, And I got my back, I'm backwards in the stand facing the tree because I'm putting the camera arm on.
Okay.
I get the camera arm on, starting to snap my camera on it. And then from where I heard the sneeze, I hear walking, and it's got to be really close. So I'm just trying to be real quiet about getting the camera arm on. I turn it on. I actually hit record because I can tell now it's a deer coming up from behind me. And I'm thinking it's probably this 10-pointer I'm after. And I kind of turn around, and I'm getting my bow, and I look up, and I get my bow in my hand, and this thing is about 8 yards in closing, coming right at me, but it's a doe. A mature doe, no fawns, maybe an older one, comes into that channel, walks up to the base of the tree right underneath me, right directly underneath me. And now remember, the stand is 9 feet up. When it puts its head straight up, there's a gap that's 4 or 5 feet from its head to my feet. And I'm in a tree this big around above its head. And it's eating the leaves off the branch I cut to get my back against the tree. Just right underneath me. And it did that for quite a while until it noticed 2 climbing sticks stuffed into the grass underneath the stand. I stared at those for a minute, took a step forward, and then started sniffing where I touched a branch, and then just backed up and backed out and took one hop, looked around, and then just walk back where it came from. But that was kind of a cool experience.
Yeah, and while we're talking about trees in the swamps, Dan, I don't know if I've heard you talk about this specifically in the past. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. When the season progresses, obviously the leaves fall off. How does leaf off affect your stand height selection? You go higher, lower, the same? What are you doing when the leaves are off?
I just do. It's kind of, for me, it's the same. I'm trying to blend in with the tree. Most of those things hardly got any leaves on with them, anyways. It gets harder in late season, though, for sure. And but also it gets easier to get lower because all the vegetation starts going down a little bit, so you can shoot a little bit lower, right?
Yep.
I prefer to be about 4 or 5 sticks up. I mean, I think 18 feet is about perfect, where a deer just doesn't look up there unless it's from a longer distance. They just don't see it when they get underneath you. They just don't do this often.
Sure.
And, I know everybody's like, where I walk, they hunt the deer like this everywhere, but they got to have a reason for that. They got to believe you're there. You know what I mean? They got to have a paranoia of that spot to be really looking for you. And I think that the real thing that matters is that you blend in a little and you catch them by sheer and utter surprise, that they have no idea that if anybody would ever be there. And if you're hunting spots where other people's tree stands are, occasionally you see people, you see litter on the ground, you're not in the right spot.
That's a perfect segue, Dan.
Okay.
We got another question from Devin here. It says, Dan, Michigan public land only hunter here. There seems to be more and more people finding these spots, funnels, swamp islands, etc. Would you personally still consider them to be huntable if there's a stand nearby?
No. Hunt harder, push further.
Okay.
I'll hunt near somebody where they're hunting, but not very often. And it's not where I have the success. So generally, for me, it's like this. You can shoot pretty good bucks in the same spots year after year. You can shoot pretty good bucks where other people hunt. But I don't think I've ever shot in a monarch, like a 5 or 6 year old or better. One of those ones we really desire, the ones you dream about, hunting where somebody else hunts. It's always been those little crazy spots you find off to the side, and they never seem to really repeat themselves on a buck like that. Once you kill one and they're like that, it's like, now you got to go find another one. You got to find those bucks where they live. They have some little niche where nobody's going and stuff. And they grow up learning that, and they hang in those spots. And for me, you could shoot those other bucks in those other spots, but that's not what I'm after. I'd shoot the buck. I have no problem shooting a 140-inch buck if it's only a 3-year-old or something, or you know what I'm saying? I had no problem with that at all. Just like the majority of these listeners. But if that's what you're targeting, that's the best you're going to shoot. It's a whole different animal. It's the whole proverb or thing we talked about before about pheasants versus squirrels. Are you hunting big bucks or are you hunting deer? Mature bucks, you have to hunt them to kill them. You can still kill a 140-inch buck or a 130-inch buck or a 120-inch buck while you're doing that. So you're not out of the game for the other bucks, but you are out of the game for the giants that you really desire. If you start hunting those spots where other people are hunting, those obvious spots, things like that, you have to find spots where people don't go. Now, there's a little to be said that, like, these Oak Islands and stuff, sometimes early season, you can kill a giant buck on the tip of an Oak Island, but people do hunt there later on. Like rut.
Yeah.
Right? And those deer learn that. So, I mean, there are things like that, but if there's a guy actively hunting an area and he goes out there regularly, which is the case with a lot of these tree stands, you find a tree stand and it's a guy's spot. That's how they hunt. They rotate through tree stands. They learned that on TV.
Yeah. If they even rotate.
They want to hunt like the Drurys hunt on their ranch, where they got 20 stands and they rotate through them based on the wind, right? And they want to hunt public land like that. And they'll go put stands or have spots where they hang. And every time the wind's the right, they'll go in there and hunt. And there is no mature buck that won't learn that. What people don't get is your scent stays out there for like 20 days. It starts to peter, but those deer still detect that this is where humans are. You know what I mean? It stays there.
Yep.
It's the equivalent of seeing you and getting spooked. Like people kind of think, well, if the deer sees me or he spooks or he smelt me when I was there, it's over. Well, if he comes there 3 days later and smells you were there. Big bucks do not get big by walking around and getting shot at. You know, you think about an animal that's 6 or 7 years old on heavy pressured public land in Michigan or Wisconsin, at least southern Wisconsin. If you think about a deer that's in those pressured areas on public land, if he's 6 or 7 years old, I mean, he could not have even ran around any one of those years in between during rut, you know, went 200 yards without running by a person's tree stand. They get that old because they're an exceptionally smart animal that grows to that age because he got he was one of the lucky ones who took a shaft and survived, or he had some close calls and he learned some lessons from them. But those animals do not move like the rest of the animals. I mean, I can remember many times scouting in the winter in the snow and finding a huge set of buck tracks, getting on them and following them for a mile or two and saying, how the hell did this animal just get through this whole swamp without walking past a tree? It had to be on purpose.
Yeah.
You know, those animals find those spots, those places. Most of the spots where I shoot these giants, that's why I laugh at these people who get mad at me about saying that you can't hunt with saddles where I hunt. You can't. I mean, I'm in a bush. I'm literally in a bush. Most of the spots where these big bucks live, there are no trees. I've got spots where I pull three pieces of buckthorn together to make it stable enough to hold my stand off the ground high enough to shoot over the stuff.
Well, your last big buck,
Literally.
that's what you did, didn't you? Didn't you have a couple trees bunched together, basically?
I didn't kill him with that one, but that last big buck though was out of a tree this big around.
Yeah,
a little tiny tree, and that's what it is. It's one tree you can hunt out of. You find one little branch you can get elevated enough out of. It's really it becomes a game, and that's the reason other people aren't hunting there. You can't hunt on the ground; it's heavy brush. You can't hunt out of a tree. There are no trees, so I'm making it work. So I'm you know, that's why we made that little tiny stand and stuff, is to get into that little bush and stuff, to get out there into the elements and get where people don't go.
Well, that's the thing. If you want,
that's basically that's the ingredients of it. It's the whole overlooked spot. It's the spot where people won't go. There's some reason people don't go there, and that's why that buck lives there. And if you really, you know, if your dream's to shoot, you know, the first 120-inch buck that walks out, you know, you'll do better hunting funnels. You'll do better hunting islands. You'll actually do better hunting by those other guys' tree stands. But if your dream is to shoot a monarch, you're probably not going to see as many deer as everybody else, but you got to get to those spots where everybody else don't go.
Yeah, not that I've shot any real giant bucks, but found that to be true. If you want unconventional results, you hunt in unconventional places and maybe use unconventional tactics, because
yeah, you hunt like everybody else, you get the results everybody else gets.
Yeah. Well, Dan, we got an easy question here. How do I get a beast stand in Ontario? I'm assuming that's Canada.
I believe you can buy them for Canada, right?
Maybe that's a Mario question, but I think I think you guys do at least North America shipping, correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we ship to Canada. If we don't, message Mario directly. You can do that at info at huntingbeastgear.com, and that goes directly straight to Mario.
Yeah, and I think at least initially, maybe it was just me, I'm a little slow sometimes. There's some confusion. So if you're looking for the Beast Gear products, the sticks or the stand, those are on a different website, Hunting Beast Gear, not the regular Hunting Beast. So if you want
our DVDs are the only thing that I know that we don't ship to Canada. Okay. It's just like the price got so expensive to ship over there that it was insanity, and Carol don't want to do it because she doesn't want to bill people that much to ship a DVD. I know Lou was doing it for a while, and he had a better way of shipping them. I don't know if he still sells them.
Here's a good one.
Stealth.
and maybe you've experienced this, Dan. I'm sure you've had a lot of hunting partners. So Dan, this is from Minnesota Greg Outdoors. What is the best way to kick a hunter out of your hunting party? The guy is horrible, complaining constantly, wakes up late, and doesn't help out at camp. How do you get rid of that guy?
Go someplace else.
Yeah.
I usually clear those people by I don't want to hunt near them, so I usually leave. But yeah, it's those people usually are full of ego too, and you can't even talk to them. I know what you're talking about. I've been around people like that, and there's got to be a time when you cut that strap. I don't know what to tell you. It's a bad situation. It's even worse if it's a family member or something, and you're kind of stuck being nice. But yeah, I would just try and straighten them out. Maybe you got to have like a pillow party. You and all your buddies got to get together with pillowcases full of soup cans and
give them the Full Metal Jacket treatment.
All right.
Yeah. Well, Dan, we're running up on an hour. Let's do one more question, and then maybe let's close with what we're going to do going forward. I think I did see a couple of questions about how often the show was going to be, when was the show going to be. So last question here from the chat. Dan, what is your go-to for ridges that you can't get a good leeward side? Example, the ridges run north and south, and your predominant wind is north or south. So your main ridge system runs the same way as your wind. What are you doing there?
I'm probably waiting for the right wind. Personally, I have done fairly well on ridges that aren't the right wind. I mean, if you don't have good, like if you're in an area where none of the ridges are set up well for the predominant wind, generally those bucks will find like draws, crevices, benches and such that will turn to wind, and they'll find a spot to bed in those spots on those ridges where generally the wind's the wrong way, but when you get into that spot, they have a way of getting the wind in from different directions. I can remember hunting this one buck out in western Wisconsin that I figured out he was bedding on this ridge in the wrong, for the wrong wind, basically. And watching him trying to get close and whatever. And when I finally got in there, and we never got him, but I went and I looked at this bed, and I couldn't figure out why he was bedding there. He was down in this low spot, not up on the, on the benches up high. He's down in this little low tangle in a draw. And I'm like, he just seems too vulnerable and stuff. But he was bedding there, so I need to hunt him. All his rub lines went in there. You'd come in and out of there when you'd see him. So I'm like, well, next year I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hunt him. So I need to know where to set up. And I had some milkweed on me, and I dropped that milkweed. And no matter where I went around there, if I was within 75 yards of that spot, the milkweed would always end up at that bed. And that's why it was there.
Interesting.
So they figure things out. You know what I mean? I think they bed based on their noses. So if you can find little areas in there that alter the wind, change the wind. I mean, sometimes they'll bed in hill country just like they do at farm country, up on a flat area, where there's a thick spot, down a low swampy area. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a leeward side just because you're in areas that have hills. They can still bed like farm country. They can still bed like swampland. They can still bed like, big woods, just got to figure it out.
Yeah, and real quick, my experience in that, it's kind of what you said. So if you're talking about a north-south ridge and you got a north wind, on any decent-sized ridge system, almost always you got fingers that come off, and a lot of times those fingers come off perpendicular. So you might have a small finger ridge that comes off to the east, and then
backside of the finger, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So if that wind's blowing out of the north and you got an east-west finger, then you look for buck bedding on the south side of that east-west ridge.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Dan, that'll probably do questions from the chat today. And I know one of the things that we talked about is we want this to be an interactive show. So I want to thank everyone that joined first show. We didn't really advertise it because we expected a little bit of technical difficulties. Like I said, I'm new to the YouTube live here, but I think with the exception of maybe getting the show started, I might have messed that up a little bit. But I think everything went smooth. I didn't see any complaints in the chat about audio or anything. So We're going to, in the future, try to be able to have people call in. So I'm working on that, getting the technical know-how to make that happen. I think maybe the next show we'll still be doing questions from the chat. And people want to know, Dan, how often and when are we going to be doing this show?
We'll probably do this about once a year. Probably every Tuesday night.
And we're targeting during season 8 Central time, right? So 9 Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain. If you're like me.
There's a very technical reason for that.
Yeah, so you can hunt, right?
I think you know what it is, right? It's Taco Tuesday. I take grill order Tuesday.
Yeah.
So that's how I get by in life. I have to spend time with my wife, otherwise, happy wife, happy Dan. So one day a week I spend with her, and that's Tuesday evenings. And then I still usually make it out for a short hunt after tacos.
You just tell her, Dan, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder. So if you're absent, she'll be real fond of you when you come back.
Right. Yeah, I was going to run down to Iowa like tomorrow, but don't know, it's going to rain down there too. It was going to rain here, so I was going to run down there, and it was like, only a day difference when the rain starts, so not.
That'll definitely be an exciting topic for future shows. You having an Iowa tag this year?
Yeah, hopefully it goes well. I'm going to a new area, so haven't hunted there. I've hunted in northeastern Iowa and southwestern Iowa. I've never hunted in south central Iowa. That's what I'm going to try now.
Always exciting to tackle new terrain. So, Dan, that's all I had. You want to wrap up with anything on your end before we shut the first show down here?
I think I'm good. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I hope you enjoy what we're doing, and in the future we might have some guests on here. If I go off on a tangent and I wake up and I'm in Iowa or something that's going on, maybe we'll have somebody replace me for a day or something. But we should expect us to go on Tuesdays on a pretty regular basis.
Awesome. So if anyone's looking forward to joining next week, I think that'll be the 17th, 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern. We'll be back here with the next episode and some new topics. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.